And welcome back to Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. So we've got Champions League. Now we're going to do the deep dive on Major League Soccer, setting the stage for Decision Day on Sunday. What is that, the 8th? If I'm doing my math correctly there. Everybody's playing in 2 time slots. You got the East playing, and then the West is going to play a couple hours after that. There's plenty to play for, plenty to still be determined. So we're going to run through everything. What happened last night, what it means for the regular season finale this weekend. Orlando beat Columbus to move into 3rd place in the Eastern Conference, despite one of the more inexplicable red cards you're ever going to see given to Nani. These are the kind of situations I point to and say, you can't tell me VAR is working the way it's supposed to when these decisions are allowed to stand or allowed to happen. I can't in any way, shape, or form explain to you why that was a red card. I thought it was incredibly harsh. There are plenty of people who agree with me on that. It might even be unanimous. Maybe not quite unanimous, but this is by no means a minority opinion I'm holding here based on what I've seen. And it's not just about the red card in this game, because like I said, Orlando did manage to win and jumped Columbus in the standings by doing so. But this is about, you're now facing a suspension, an important time of the season with real ramifications here. On top of just the principle of let's not have that be a red card, please. I certainly hope Orlando appeal it and that appeal is successful and Nani doesn't miss any more games and it's not a big deal at the end of the day. But baffling decision. If we don't have VAR to fix things like that, then what are we doing? It's one of my, up there in terms of my biggest frustrations, is I will not be satisfied with VAR until we find a way to fix things like this. We're going to get microscopic on offsides, but we can't somehow seem to do the right thing here. It continues to confound me, and Nani was beside himself, and understandably so. I've been talking about this for a little while now, specifically last show, I believe. The Chicago Fire are playing really well. They just cannot find a way to get 3 points. And it happened again last night. They have a late winner that gets correctly disallowed because of an offside and potential handball in there too. It was a sort of strange sequence of events, but it was absolutely the right call. They're winning 2-0 against Minnesota, have control. Then Emmanuel Reynoso comes onto the field, and just like that, Minnesota overturned the 2-goal deficit, make it 2-2, have some chances to go 3-2, and Chicago thinks they have the winner, and then it gets disallowed. Like I said, right call, no reason to be upset. But that would have been a massive 3 points. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference playoff race here in a minute. They do get a point, which helps and puts them in a decent position heading into Decision Day, but that 3 would have gone a long way. And just from a morale standpoint, they're doing a lot of really good things. They've got to be pleased with where they're at. They're just not getting the results to show for it. Dallas does get the result. A 1-0 win over Nashville. They move into the top 4 in the West. It's still very tight up there. We'll go through all that in a minute as well. Colorado continues to win. Right after Seattle, they now take down the Portland Timbers thanks to Kellen Acosta's late goal. They are looking like the team that I thought that they would be. I really cooled on them at MLS's back and just the way things started. And specifically the way that they came back before they had to shut down. But I was convinced that what we saw at the end of last season was real. That was supported at the very beginning of the season before the COVID shutdown, and then it just sort of really fell apart. But they pulled it back together, are playing really well right now. Not a team you want to play heading into the playoffs. San Jose managed to survive a Jackson Ewell red card to defeat LAFC. Chris Wondolowski doing Chris Wondolowski things. Somehow, some way, they are also in the playoffs. Part of this is, of course, the expanded field and trying to provide as many opportunities as possible with the irregularities caused by COVID. But the way that they were playing a couple months ago and the amount of goals they were giving up, this is really impressive. And I continue to point to the fact that Matias Almeida never lost this team. They never lost confidence. There's always going to be risks with the way they play. It's just a very specific style that you have to execute or you're going to be in trouble. But they've really turned things around. They're also full of confidence heading into the playoffs. And then finally, Chicharito scores for the Galaxy, but gets equaled out by Raul Ruidiaz very, very late on. So that's a 1-1 draw there between the Galaxy and Seattle. So here's where we stand. In the Eastern Conference, you have 5 teams fighting for these last 2 spots. 8 teams are in, still 2 spots to determine. All these teams have played 22 games. They're all going to play the 23 maximum, so that's a good thing. We don't have to go to points per game here. Things are much messier in the West. It's pretty clear-cut in the East. Montreal's got 23 points. Chicago's got 23 points. Atlanta's got 22. Miami's got 21. DC's got 21. Those are your teams still in contention. So it's a straightforward win and in for Montreal and Chicago. They're holding the spots right now. Obviously, if they win, they will continue to hold those spots. This gets particularly interesting because DC plays Montreal. And all of these teams are within 2 points of each other. So one win by a Miami or a DC could really make things interesting and change quite a lot. However, DC would lose the tiebreaker to Miami. So even a win, which would theoretically open up a playoff spot, were DC to beat Montreal, because DC would then have 24 points to Montreal's 23, that spot would actually go to Inter Miami if Inter Miami also win. So there are all kinds of different scenarios. And then, of course, if Atlanta win and either Montreal or Chicago drop points, that's their spot because they'll have 25 points. They're sort of in between these last 2 teams that need a win and help and the 2 teams that are winning in. There's a lot of different scenarios here. We're not going through all of them. But that's where things stand. So all these teams are within 3 points. That a win by DC or Miami and a loss by Montreal or Chicago jumps those bottom 2, either of those bottom 2 teams into a playoff spot, assuming Atlanta also doesn't win. There's just a lot going on here, a lot of combinations. But here are your games. So like I said, DC's playing Montreal. Miami has Cincinnati. You've really got to hope that Inter Miami wins that game. If they can't find a way to win that one to the one team eliminated in the Eastern Conference, that's on them. I just can't have much sympathy. It would be a very disappointing end to this first season if they can't at least put some pressure on some people and make people hold up their end of the bargain here. Chicago plays NYCFC, and Columbus plays Atlanta. NYCFC is currently 2 points behind Columbus for that 4th automatic bye in the Eastern Conference. So both Chicago and Atlanta are playing really good teams. An NYCFC team in really good form right now after what they did to the Red Bulls. A Columbus team that just beat Philly and then lost to Orlando. But they're also really invested in making sure that they can try to do everything in their power to get that bye. Because especially in this playoff system, with the uncertainty and the unpredictability and the fact that you're just playing 90 minutes in a weird season where who knows what you're going to get. I like the Fire's chances of potentially pulling off an upset if they can get through this little play-in thing with teams 7 through 10 because of the way they're performing. they took the Union to the brink and felt very unlucky that they didn't come away with a point, and they were down a man for most of that game. They were up 2-0 against a good Minnesota team. I could absolutely see them winning a game or two. So you just want to get as deep into the playoffs as you possibly can without having to play anybody. Because this is not... There's just always upsets. This is what makes this playoffs so special. You don't see as many of these random upsets and crazy games in other sports just because it's harder to be the win as the underdog and be the better team in the NFL or something, where you don't have to be the better team to win over 90 minutes in a soccer game because 1 or 2 moments can change everything. Whereas you got to continue to score touchdowns or continue to play good defense in the NBA or whatever it might be. So that's what makes these playoffs so much fun. I think it's the most entertaining playoffs purely from a dramatics standpoint. And I'll stand by that. So, Columbus and NYCFC, not only do you want to continue to play well going into the playoffs, but there's absolutely an incentive to make sure you try to do everything in your power to get that 4th spot in the East. Then we go to the Supporters' Shield. Last night's results mean it is officially a 2-team race. Philly, Toronto. Philly has the tiebreaker. They're even on points right now. But Philly is going to win the tiebreaker. Which means that all the Union have to do to get that elusive trophy is to just match Toronto's result. Philly played New England. Toronto played the New York Red Bulls. Both of those teams have clinched their playoff spots. They're just kind of in this mix, trying to make sure they avoid having to play that extra game in the little play-in tournament thing to get from 10 teams to 8. So they've got incentive and, of course, want to be playing as well as possible heading into the playoffs. So it's on the Union. Keep an eye out for Joe Bendick in goal again. Can he put in a better performance and not cost his team goals like he did against Columbus? Toronto is starting to get some of their players back, Iowak and Nola, and they might get more. There's a good chance that they're going to get more players back for this game. I don't know to what extent they might play or actually would be available, but they're starting to get some of these guys back. They were really, really depleted for a little bit there. It seemed like they had one string of injuries after another. You get Michael Bradley back, you lose Jonathan Osorio. They had no strikers, so Pozuelo was playing up there. I'm still really high on that team. So look out to see what kind of 18 and what kind of starting lineup Greg Vanney, or I should say what kind of bench and what kind of starting lineup Greg Vanney puts out there. Because that's going to be an indication of what they look like from a health standpoint heading into the playoffs. Because they absolutely want this trophy. Absolutely want this trophy. Look at what he said after they decided originally not to award it. They're going to do everything in their power to try and win this game. And, of course, this also has ramifications heading into the playoffs because they're going to be one of the favorites. So we're going to get an idea of how healthy they might be. That's the Eastern Conference and the Supporters' Shield. Again, 2 teams. All the Union have to do is match Toronto's result. Then in the West, we have our playoff teams set. Kansas City, Portland, Seattle, Dallas, Minnesota, LAFC, Colorado, San Jose. Those are your 8. Everybody else is eliminated. We're only playing for seeding right now and home field advantage and all of that. So everybody except for Colorado and San Jose is in contention for the top 4. I said Dallas jumped in there with the win over Nashville last night. It's going back and forth. Every game people play, this is moving because one team loses and then somebody else jumps them on points per game, and it's going back and forth. Kansas City is on top right now, though, which means Kansas City get home field advantage, the number 1 overall seed in the West if they win. But Portland and Seattle are still in contention for that. If Kansas City drop points, there's a decent chance one of those 2 teams end up as the number 1 seed. And like I said, You got 6 teams in contention for the top 4. There isn't too much at the bottom. I don't remember off the top of my head if it's even possible. It changes. Colorado's playing well enough. I believe they're going to hold on to that 7th spot. So there's a lot going on here. Again, too many scenarios to really dial down and explain all of them. What you need to know right now, your top 4 is Kansas City, Portland, Seattle, and Dallas in that order, which means they're in control of their own fate, obviously. Kansas City is your number 1 seed at this moment in time. And the only 2 spots we're playing for in terms of getting into the playoffs are in the East. We know our West teams, it's just a question of matchups, who has home field advantage, who gets home field advantage moving forward in terms of the 2 seed versus the 3 seed or whatever it might be, all of that stuff. So there is your Major League Soccer rundown headed into the final day of the regular season. Plenty to play for, from playoff spots to supporters' shields to home field advantage to buys in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be a really exciting couple hours there. Again, all the Eastern Conference games kick off at the same time, and then all the Western Conference games kick off at the same time. So it's going to be simultaneous results, which always makes this fun, just like in the Premier League or any other league where you're paying attention to what's happening over here while watching this game, and it's all impacting each other. Makes for a very dramatic ending to the season, which of course is what the league and everybody want. Always love the drama and entertainment. We're almost certainly going to get it in some way, shape, or form here, specifically in the East with those 5 teams fighting for 2 spots and the Supporters' Shield. So that's what the Major League Soccer landscape looks like with 1 game to go for all of these teams. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to look at everything else happening this weekend, because the headlines are not going to be about Major League Soccer when we do our show on Tuesday. They'll be in our first 5, but there are a couple matchups in Europe that are almost title deciders. Not really, but some of the bigger matchups of the entire season in Germany and England are happening this weekend, so we're going to look at all of that, everything that you should keep an eye on for this weekend when we come back. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports.